we talked to a lot of people in China. Google's not available there. So you want to run an app there, it will just automatically run there. And the platform takes care of a lot of the same stuff that Google takes care of when you run on Google's resources. And any of the 4 million or so apps will be able to do this. And AppScale you can deploy anywhere. On your laptop, in Amazon, in Google Compute Engine. Most of our users actually execute in Compute Engine. They just want a little more freedom, they want a little more flexibility. They like the App Engine model. And I'll speak to that a little bit if you haven't. How many people have used App Engine to write code before? All right, a couple people. So if you don't know about the model, I'll explain that at the end, just to show you how it's different, why it's really cool, and makes you really efficient once you get your head around it. Okay, so that's the idea. And really what we're trying to do is take containers to the next level, right? Instead of packaging and making sure that your configuration is consistent across your deployments, we also want to make that execution consistent across deployments. So all the things that happen at execution time should be consistent, should be something that you can trust. The same things that happen in Google's cloud should happen on your local servers or behind your firewall or in Amazon, right? You shouldn't have to be forced to execute anywhere. You get the choice as developers. And so the platform will manage things like, how well your applications play together, whether they can be moved between clouds, whether they grow and shrink on demand by themselves, according to the resources you're using. If you want to customize them, you want to use a few libraries that don't exist in App Engine, or you want to use new tool sets as they emerge, you can just plug them in to AppScale, right? It's completely open source. It's just a distributed system. You just plug that in and your apps can make use of it.
Question? So is this like a container manager and Google's APIs rolled into one?
It's really the combination of the two.
Awesome.
We do it at the virtual machine level, but it's the same exact thing. Right?
Cool.
The configuration is managed there, so we can have the full isolation. That's what we're looking for there. And then we have, and something else that's kind of interesting, and I think is emerging, is that the way the Google Cloud Platform and the Google App Engine, there's millions of apps that are active, over 4 million that are active right now today, right? You can have a few apps, you could have one app. And so what we're seeing more and more is that this platform, that AppScale, really becomes a runtime system, like a Java virtual machine. So you write a piece of Java code and you run it, it runs in a virtual machine. AppScale is really the Java virtual machine of distributed web services. So you can package it up as your app and AppScale, and you don't even have to know that AppScale's there, right? You don't have to tell anybody. You just take your app and it'll just run on a distributed cluster, and all of your users just see your app, right? So it hides all that complexity for you as a developer, but it also hides it from your customers or your users of your apps. And then we have this portal. So let's say you do this a lot. You have 100 apps or 50 apps or 1,000 apps. We have a portal that lets you manage all that, right? That configuration management that has to be consistent. Your management of the runtime also has to be consistent. How often do you back up? Where do you restore? How do you manage whether the APIs you're accessing are actually working, and how do you handle that when it's not? And so we have a portal, just the AppScale portal, free to use, where you just register your apps and you can control what they do and how they're working and observe them all at one place. And this portal is really, from the company side that I work for, that's what we're going to be selling to the enterprise. Right now it's free. It's going to be free for open source users, open source app developers. But what we'll do is we'll tailor that to have all kinds of really interesting, functionality, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But that's sort of what the company does, and then it supports, and then that allows us to support open source and our developers. So two big things that happen in the portal to control your apps is this ability to monitor. I'm not sure if you can see that, it's kind of really light, but all this is just an alert system to say when your APIs that your application is using start to misbehave. and they misbehave all the time. We're writing web services today, and we're coding against lots and lots of different APIs. Google has millions, thousands, hundreds, really good ones, but there's also ones elsewhere. And what the platform does is it monitors how the connectivity to those APIs is doing. Because sometimes it's down, it could be the network, sometimes it could be the service, sometimes the API could change out from under you. Some companies, Google's really good at keeping consistency. You start using APIs, your app appears to be your code. But if you're relying on a bunch of other people's APIs, you now become responsible for that. And when that starts to go south, you need to know and you need to be able to respond. And so Hawkeye is just a monitoring system for these APIs to let you know that, hey, the data store, not behaving well. You were getting this many requests per second yesterday, it's about half. Is your app going to handle that? And should you think about, masking that in some way when these bubbles come through the pipeline? The other thing that the portal does, it allows you to back up and restore your apps, but you don't have to do it to the same system. You could back up your app running an App Engine. This all works for App Engine and AppScale. It doesn't matter where your apps are running. You could back up your apps in App Engine and restore them in AppScale, running in Amazon or running in Google Compute Engine or running somewhere else behind your firewall. And that allows this migration, an easy way to do migration. And then over time, we're working on the migration piece to make that as fast as possible. You can have apps running both places. The future, we believe, is really hybrid, a combination of executing on Google's resources and executing behind your firewall or on your laptop or on another system. That gives you fault tolerance, it gives you, data durability, all these benefits. But you need the tools to be able to function between these things. And that's really where we're going. We're going to be looking at how do you develop the next generation of open source to really allow hybrid computing to come to fruition for you, the developers. Okay, so that's sort of our vision, but you have lots of great tools that work today that you can try. The other thing that's interesting, and I think it's good, I wanted to point out to you, is that you can have the platform do everything for you, just like Google does, and it's no ops, no hands-on. You just deploy your app and it just works. But because it's open source, it's just a Linux system behind the scenes. You have tons of documentation. You could get in there and specialize the Linux system, install the libraries that you want your apps to use, customize your Cassandra installation to be really optimized for your workloads. You can get in there and do, and we will help, what you need to make your apps run well. And because this is just an app wrapper, you can tailor it to individual apps. You don't need, if you have 50 apps running, you could tailor the system to that, multi-tenancy. But if you have one app, you could tailor it to that. But it's still distributed, it's still scaling, automatically scaling up and down. So you get the whole distributed system.
So when I reconfigure the database, does the app have to change, or does it just see the same database?
It's exactly the same. Yeah, cool. It's all at the API level. So you're talking to the API with your puts and your gets and your transactions. Behind the scenes, we can read and write and to whatever the underlying configuration is. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about the model. If some of you haven't programmed an App Engine before. It takes a little getting used to, I'm sure, as you probably know since you guys have done this before. It's a sandbox model, and the idea is you want to make development as simple as possible. But that requires that we restrict you a bit, right? If we let you do everything you ever wanted to do, it's really hard to specialize a system, especially at Google scale, right? We're talking thousands and thousands of small containerized instances that are running your app as you become popular and famous and everybody hits your website, hits your web app. So for Google to allow that, for it to be stable and to allow this type of automatic scaling, they sandbox your execution into what appears to be small runtime systems. You write a Python app, it's in a Python runtime, and you can grow and shrink these guys. If you write a Java app, same thing, Go, PHP. And so what you can't do is you can't just arbitrarily access the file system, because who knows where your app's running? You don't, you shouldn't, right? You shouldn't have to worry about that. Processing limits, if you receive a web request and it goes for more than 10 minutes, something is wrong. The web system is supposed to be without state and very quick and responsive. And so, and for Google to remain stable and scale requires that you have your responses return within a fixed amount of time, 10 seconds or so. And then if you need something longer, then you can execute a compute engine, or you can execute with these things called backends. It's possible to do more, but if you're working within this model, this is what you're restricted to. All data persistence. Any data you want to save is got to be stored in the database, and that can be a NoSQL, very scalable NoSQL, or an SQL. You got to choose. You can't have both. Your data, if you put your data in both, you are responsible as the app writer to make that happen. Okay, they're not weird. And then there's a whitelist of libraries, which is why I keep mentioning libraries earlier, because the first thing that everyone comes to us with is, I want to run SciPy. I want my app to access, this cool Java library that just came out. It'll be a year before Google is able to support that library, if they ever do. They don't support some because they're not scalable. They're just inherently that. And so, if you want those, you can put those into AppScale. Maybe it makes sense for your apps, and it'll still be high performance. Google again has to run millions. You have to run, thousands of instances or one app even, right? You don't need all of that scale, so you can do a lot more with your customized deployment. And so if you want to keep your app and have it be compatible with both App Engine and AppScale, be able to move it anywhere at any time, you want to work within this sandbox. If the sandbox really annoys you, or it's really hard for you or your developers to learn, you can turn it all off. It's open source. It's one flag. And we turn off the restrictions. And this is usually how I teach people AppScale or the App Engine model, is we turn off those restrictions at first. So we just get used to the web development process, and then we can start to rein in your app a little. Say, hey, this request, it goes a little long. So why don't we make that faster, break it up into multiple requests, and then you can be compatible with both App Engine and AppScale and move back and forth. Whatever makes the most sense for you. If you want to use Google and pay for Google for the super scale, you can, and that's really great because it doesn't cost very much. But let's say you can become big, you get this huge, burst of attention, or you're using this model in a way that really Google wasn't designed for. What you can do is run an AppScale, tailor the system to your workload, and pay whatever you pay, right? If it's your own cluster, you own it. And if you want to run a Google Compute Engine, it's a completely different model for pricing. What we find is that in some cases, some apps are least expensive in App Engine, other apps are least expensive in Compute Engine, and you don't know which. And so this ability to move allows you to investigate that and find the best price for you. So your app lives in these sort of containerized runtime systems, and then all the cool stuff happens when you call an API, right? The APIs from the data store or the SQL or Memcache and background tasks. All these are just APIs, just functions. You just call them, and they just work. And so we take all of these APIs at Google and we implement them with open source technologies. So everything in our system is open source. RabbitMQ for our tasking system, eJabberD for our messaging system. Everything that everyone else uses is what we use, and we just automatically configure, deploy, and manage.
So you have load balancers in there. You actually do the auto scaling.
Auto scaling.
Awesome.
We do auto scaling ourselves.
Wow.
Yes. So and then our backend data store is Cassandra. We've experimented with lots of different NoSQLs. So in the research side, which is what I do, I also work at UC Santa Barbara. We can look at different NoSQLs, but for the one that's stable, the stable release, we focus on Cassandra. MySQL for SQL, right? So so we can and we swap this out. So what's cool about this is, let's say you're at a company and you have a big old Oracle database that all your developers use. Well, we can just route that API to your Oracle database, and now you're using this investment that you've made. And we can do that for all your software. You have an authentication system or an authorization system built in already, LDAP or whatever at your school or your company. You can just use it as your authentication mechanism. grab onto that from our API, the user's API, the login API. So it really allows you to have freedom both in where you run, but in the implementations of the services you use. So you want to try it? It's fast start. 10 minutes. I bet any of you could. You can run it in Amazon. We have a fast start for Amazon, a fast start for Google Compute Engine. You use Vagrant and VirtualBox. Try it. There's a link. It's this. Just AppScale.com and get started. Dash. And if you like VirtualBox and Vagrant, you can have it up and working much faster. And then the way it works is, what you get is a virtual machine with all the software you could ever want in the platform, and then you instantiate it by starting those virtual machines. You then log into one of those virtual machines, and you'd say, AppScale tools, here are all the instances I started, because we don't know how many you started. It could be one, it could be many. So you just hand it a bunch of the IP addresses, just give it the list of IP addresses, and you say go. And that AppScale up, just like Vagrant, if you're familiar with that. And that will start AppScale and the auto-scaling system and the platform for you. Okay? So you get the VM, you start it, you hand it the IPs, everything else is taken care of for you. You always SSH in and mess with it yourself too, so it's up to you. And then the portal is available once you got an app running. Just go to the portal, register your app, and you can watch and see how its APIs are doing. You can do backup and recovery. If you want. This is how easy it is. You log into that first instance, AppScale init, just like Vagrant init. We call it cluster. It's just one of our configuration options. Creates an AppScale file. You edit that file, and you put in your IPs. There at the end, you just say AppScale up, deploys the system. It's a distributed system now, so if you have 10 instances, it's going to take a while. 5-6 minutes or so, because it's really trying to do all the handshakes of all of the services, making sure everybody knows about each other, find each other, make sure that your app's going to run well. Right? One instance, it'll start right away. Okay? If you want to look at some apps, we have a repository with sample apps. If you want to just test out the App Engine model, just for fun, you can go here and get a bunch of them. Do AppScale, and if you forget what this is, AppScale sample apps. You'll find it. There's a bunch of apps. You can look Java. I think there's some Go in there. These are all open source, all free to use. And then when you're done, or you say AppScale deploy for your apps, AppScale down when you're done, and it'll take it all out. Be a little careful, because if you're running this, when you're running this in production, you got to make sure that your data is being persisted, backed up, because you do an AppScale down, it'll save the data, but you can do I forgot, AppScale clean, and it'll blow away all your data. So it's a good way to play around, but you want to be careful when you move to production. So that's it. It's an open source implementation of Google App Engine, but other APIs as well. We can handle the SQL API. And we can grow as you know, the people who use AppScale want more APIs. We can interface to those. Easy integration. It's really an active container. You should think about it as a consistent deployment option. But then when your application runs, it's also consistent. We manage that for you if we want, if you want us to, and the platform anyway. And then you can get in there and tailor it to your needs. The model is really great. I don't want to put too much of a negative spin on the fact that it restricts you. When it restricts you, you become very efficient at what's left, at what you're able to do, and you, once you get your head in this model, can develop really fast. Even if you never touch AppScale, I recommend the model. Go and try it. It's a really great web services development platform. Endpoints, fabulous API and system for your mobile apps. They all need backends. They all need to store their data somewhere. It's going to be in something like App Engine. Decouples your innovation from all that dev and all the IT operations that you ever want to mess with or you don't. And it's really about giving you the ability to move anywhere. You don't know what the future holds. You might be just playing around with an app today. You want the knowledge to know that if it did take off, I have the choice of executing it anywhere. And I can force the cloud to be competitive, because if Amazon's a little bit better in price, I can go there. If Google's a little bit better in price, I can go there. You, as developers, are restricted. That's all I got. So let me know if you have questions.
I think
Please do. Yeah.
So when would you say recommend people to use this? Like when is running on the actual App Engine going to be a better decision than trying to do this?
What we see is that if you're really a heavy-duty user of the data store, which is, by the way, the most common API used in all of App Engine, when you're a heavy user of it, and let's say you do a lot of writes, it's optimized for reads, but you need to do a lot of writes, or you need to do a lot of transactions because we need to update multiple rows in that database at once. Then it's worth taking a look at AppScale because we may be able to run we're likely to be able to run that same app in Compute Engine. You still pay Google, you can stay in Google, you don't have to own your hardware if you don't want. And just because we're using Cassandra and you're paying on the instance hour, you don't get charged on each access, which is what you're getting charged for. And it's just pennies in Google App Engine. But if you use that API in particular heavy ways, then moving to Cassandra and just paying on the instance hour could save you lots of money. We've cut some people's from we have some from 10,000 a month to hundreds of thousands a month in half in some cases, and others none. So it really depends on your model, but it doesn't hurt you to test it out. You could even, the company will even do it for you. They sign an NDA with you, they get your app, they run it, they show you, you can test the performance, you can test its ability. They'll do that for you, and you can kind of get a feel for where you're going to benefit, and they can do that analysis for you. And the other thing is test dev. Right? I love using my Vagrant, and a lot of times that SDK, because that's how you do it now. Today, download the SDK, you write code against that SDK, and the SDK is this heavy, single-threaded runtime, and that is not necessarily representative of what your app will do when it really runs in a distributed system. And so just by using AppScale locally, it's what I do for testing. Even in Vagrant, just the multiple threads with everything running around, you'll tease out a lot more bugs. So I also like it for that. I think those are the two things. And just that knowledge, when you have some downtime or you're getting ready to launch, knowing that it's going to run well on AppScale just gives you a peace of mind to think, later, I'll have a choice. And that's a lot of what our users do. They just make sure it always works.
So specifically for we are moving some modules onto the Compute Engine. But the main thing is still running on App Engine. But Compute Engine, then you have to maintain it separately. You have to do your own stuff. So I'm kind of thinking that, okay, if we can have AppScale running on Compute Engine and just run those modules, for instance, like the memcache, right? There is a limit.
Yes, we get this a lot. Memcache.
So I want to make the memcache really grow, and I want to really use it. So I don't have this arbitrary limit on the memcache.
You can totally do that. And a lot of people come to us just for memcache. Yes. Okay. Memcache, again, limited. So if you don't want those limits, we run it for you, and you pay for the instance hour instead of on a per request basis. So that's totally doable too.
How long have you been going?
About 3 years. It came out of the university, out of my group. We did it for. I'm a professor at UC Santa Barbara. And then we did it for research purposes because we wanted to see what everybody's app was doing for clouds, and so that we could come up with the next generation of that. But it just took off. A lot of people wanted to use it, and so my students spun out the company. I worked with them for about a year, and then I went back to the university because I love that.
What's your name?
Chandra Krintz. Yeah, and so I'm back there, but I go around and give talks, of course, like this, and teach people the App Engine model as well as the systems. So I'm still heavily involved in helping them.
So do you actually work with companies who are developing software for the App Engine or running and then kind of help them kind of integrate the AppScale and get things running?
One big example of that is Cloud Sherpas. They're a partner of ours, and they just write App Engine apps. And they have two models. They have where they come to us. One where they just want to execute the same app in China, which they can't do with App Engine right now. They just run it in Amazon, far enough away that that latency is fine, or on their own data centers. Or they want to take it private. They have an app let's say for a clothing company, where they have on the floor, they're selling things, they have their iPads or their web pads, and they want to keep all their data behind the firewall. And so they can take that same app and runs an app engine, run it on AppScale in the store or in the headquarters, and then it just works. So as they're developing, we work alongside them to make sure that all this works. Because there's a million APIs, and so how we did this was we chose the most popular ones and we implemented those. So you might come along and you might use an API that not a lot of people use, but it works great for you. That's what you want to check out. Do we support that? And if not, we will, because we just have to be motivated by people's use. So we're not completely API compatible. We're compatible with all the APIs so far of the thousands of apps we've tried. And so that's how we build our platform out. But it's pretty straightforward once you got one to add more. Other questions? Yes, please, Paul.
Sure. Can you talk about using this in an enterprise? Like, are there difficulties like security or pushback or something like that?
Yeah, the biggest thing in the enterprise is it has to be open source. That's a big one that we keep getting asked for. Two, they really struggle between how much IT they want and how much IT they don't want. And we come in and say we do it all for you, and they're like, whoa, we need to get in there. We have people who understand this stuff, and so that's really the tension is what do these companies do? And who we appeal to most are companies without large engineering teams, without IT staff, because you can do the no-ops side. And so our key challenge is to get it into the DevOps side. Get it into people who like to do DevOps and show the utility of it there. So that's a challenge. The other thing that's kind of interesting is what they'd like to do with it is, they have lots of software investments already, the enterprise does, right? They have, like I said, authentication, they have their own search technology, and they don't want to, waste that money. The higher ups say, no, we have to keep that and use that. So hooking that in, and then that's an adapter. So they can't just take the platform and write the adapters. It's a pretty complex system. So a challenge that a lot of enterprises face is it's hard to learn AppScale well enough for them to do the adapters, and so that's why you pay us to do them. And so that's a key challenge. And lastly, how many apps are you going to run, and what platforms are you going to have in the enterprise? The enterprise is not, the platform space, I believe, is not like the infrastructure space. Cloud infrastructures, you choose one, it runs on your hardware, and it just lives there. Platforms, you got a choice. Like I said, you can run one app. It's just a runtime system. It's just distributed, scalable. It's efficient. Maybe you want to run Cloud Foundry and AppScale, and enterprises just can't get their heads around that yet. What's that model for deploying cloud platforms? Should I have 2 or 3 for my teams, 1 per team? Do I have run lots of apps? Do I have one app? That hasn't been kind of totally worked out. I think we're discovering that as we go, and so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So have you guys put any effort into the deployment piece of it? Cloud Foundry is really hard to get going, and it doesn't seem all that stable. This looks pretty mature. How does it compare?
Yeah, it's lights out easier. Super experts. If you're a computer scientist, if you're like Paul down there, it's amazing. You can handle it. You can install Cloud Foundry. You're gonna spend hours though, and I'm paying you big bucks. Let's say I'm paying. Do I really want that? I'll work on that. We've worked really hard to make it one button. 10-minute install. We give you a VM. You download the VM, you instantiate it, it just runs. And so we worked really hard at making the deployment really simple, because who we're appealing to, like I said earlier, are people without IT, without chops, without computer scientists in some cases. They just have an app that Cloud Sherpas has written for them, and they want to run it locally. What are you going to do? So that is really where I think we shine. And if you play around with it and you can try it, it should, hopefully it'll work out of the box. If not, you know where I can be reached. Any other questions? Yeah.
Give an example of companies or your customers.
Yeah. So
using this,
yes, Snapchat is the biggest of the biggest. And they have a huge app. It's a very lightweight app, but it demands super scale and tremendous scale. So tons and tons of machines. Udacity, I'm sure you heard of. Angry Birds, App Engine app. There's just a handful of the big names. Best Buys, home, where you share information about what you've bought with your friends or your outdoor furniture. It's like a social networking thing they've got. That's all App Engine. And so, yeah, and a lot of them are mobile app backends. So we'll have companies who are really good at developing the apps for your phones, but they don't have the chops to manage an IT or a distributed system. That's a totally different skill set. So lots of our users really like that model. They want to focus on their core competency on the phone apps, and then they use the platform with very few IT staff, if any, to run AppScale.
So how exactly are these, the Snapchat and these guys using AppScale?
Snapchat is just, we're just in talks with them. So they're just so big, I'm not sure it's going to benefit them to move off. They're sort of like Netflix and Amazon. And Netflix at this point, if they move off of Amazon, that's just a huge thing. So same thing with Snapchat, but they really like local development, and so they're using AppScale just to kind of play with pieces of their app locally, test dev.
Yeah, that's it.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then that's free. They use that for free. But as a customer, they're not quite ready to make the jump of migration and movement and data backup and all that yet. But they do it all manually, so we could save a lot of time with that. Yeah, and everything else is pretty much behind the firewall is our big thing, and then just really easy backup and recovery technologies.
So this is I Googled AppScale and I saw a paper, the eCloud Con 2009 paper, and your name is on it. So
yeah, that's why it was a research project first, and in my lab, and so we have lots of papers on it, and that's one of them. Not the best. If you want to read a good one, I have a good one. I can point you out. I don't know why that one popped up first. Maybe it's because it's the easiest to read. No, there's really good ones about how we do some really clever migration. There's a lot of research questions behind this. So if you're interested in that, I'd love to talk to you offline. There's tons to do here. But for the product, you gotta make it simple, lights out, easy to use, self-managing as much as possible. And I'm really, on the research side now, really interested in, can we use a platform like this for, interesting applications like agriculture. Farmers know nothing about IT, but they could benefit so much from that. And so our current focus has been on this thing called Smart Farm, where we use AppScale and Eucalyptus privately to keep farmer data secure and let them do analytics on it without knowing what's behind the scenes in the clients. So we do kind of, really out there things on the research side, and that's what it's really fun. Yeah.
Might be a loaded question, but what does Google think of AppScale?
So we're total partners with Google. In fact, they have engineering resources that they dedicate to this project. So they want an open source implementation of their products. They just can't support it. They don't ship software. They don't have that core competency. They could, like Google. But they don't want it. They want to stick with SaaS-based web services, and having us be the leader in the open source piece of this they totally support. They want to reach the open source community and the developer community on that side. And if you look at who the App Engine users are, developers, they're not traditional open source users. And so Google's really interested in us trying to bring into the App Engine model more open source developers.
Yeah, it seems perfect for test dev. Just absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
I can see it.
So other questions? All right, yeah, please.
You mentioned there was tons to do. What does the future look like for AppScale?
Yeah, I think this API space is ripe with research questions. For example, nobody writes code, right? We take code from others in open source, we build on it, we turn around. It's getting worse. What's worse is we're just accessing APIs of other people. And that API sprawl is a nightmare. Who knows what you're using? Who remembers? What happens if you're my developer for a while and then you leave? I don't know who I'm calling. And enterprises have this in spades. So all their developers are developing really cool apps and web services, and they're putting them up. Who owns them? Who's using them? What happens if you change versions on them? So I think that's going to be a really important enterprise level problem that needs to be solved, and research can start that. And then I think, of course, from the research side, how do we apply this to areas. Can we have a personal cloud that you keep, like you're like in your water, hot water closet. It's a box that lives in your house and it gathers all your data and allows you to do analytics on it and make predictions. I think that's the future on the application side, and like with the farming, and we also work with people with diabetes, and I think that's going to be the next generation of innovation that comes, and everyone can participate in that. So I'm hoping to be part of that.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, great questions. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you.